Good morning.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Tracy, and this is Em, and this, you must know, this is Elly Griffiths. We've got Elly Griffiths with us today. Hello, Elly. It's so lovely to see you.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It's lovely to have lunch with
you. Indeed, separately. This is not your first time visiting us at Kett's Books, is it? We have photographic evidence for a start of a visit that you did with us that we keep in a little frame up in the bookshop many years ago. So
in fact, I visited in the really early days of the shop, and I actually in the shop itself, which was lovely. I can't remember how long ago that was, but it was quite early days of this amazing shop that you've created.
Yes, I think that was probably 2016, early 2016, because you were sort of our second author visit. Might have even been 2015. So we were very, very excited, and you've been a great friend to the shop ever since. So you come for 2 visits, and we don't have this many books for any other author because your books just remain popular continuously. So we thought that it would be brilliant for all of our customers, readers, and viewers if you could come in and tell us about what's good to read right now.
Great. So yeah, thank you. Wow, that's a lovely selection of my books. I can't believe I nearly fill a shelf there. So would you like to hear my recommendations for books to read?
Not yet, no, because
we need to hear about your books, Elly. Okay. Can I just set the scene here? So Tracy and I both opened up our curtains this morning in our respective houses and looked out over the Norfolk vista and noticed that we were in some sort of foggy, misty soup. And we both thought, what a wonderful day to be speaking to Elly Griffiths, who writes so beautifully about Norfolk and the Norfolk landscape. So yes, Elly, this is absolutely the perfect morning to hear about all your books. And of course, I'm referring to a particular series. So could you start by telling us a bit about that one?
I love the thought that you both looked at this misty morning and thought of me. That feels like a great compliment, actually. But yes, so really, I suppose, think about Norfolk, think about mist. You've got to think about the Dr. Ruth Galloway books. And it's a series now. The first one is The Crossing Places. I've just finished. Oh, look! This is so cool. Look at this. First one is The Crossing Places. The most recent one is The Lantern Men, which came out. Oh, look at that! But there'll be a new one in February called The Nighthawk. So I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. But just to set the scene, so the idea for the books came to me when I was walking across Titchwell Marsh with my husband, Andy, who's an archaeologist. And those of you, listen to us from lovely Norfolk will know Titchwell Marsh. So walking across the little path across the marsh, and Andy happened to say that prehistoric people thought marshland was sacred because it's neither land or sea, but something in between. They thought of it as a bridge to the afterlife, a path between life and death, between land and sea and life and death. And it was a liminal zone, an in-between place. And I thought of that when you mentioned that sort of misty view out to the window this morning. And the entire plot of The Crossing Places came to me in that minute, which has never happened to me before or since. And it's about a forensic archaeologist called Dr. Ruth Galloway, who lives on her own with her cats on a beautiful but rather bleak stretch of North Norfolk coastline. And she teaches at a made-up university called the University of North Norfolk. One day she goes into work and there's a police officer waiting for her there, and he has found bones buried on the marshland and he wants her to look at them. He maybe even hopes that they're the bones of a child who's gone missing recently, because then there would be some closure for the parents. But the bones turn out to be over 2,000 years old. Yet Ruth is drawn into the investigation, and goodness me, now I'm on book 13, I can tell you, into a very complicated relationship with the policeman, DCI Harry Nelson. So the books, as I say, there are now 13 books in the series. And just to say quickly, I'm not superstitious, maybe I'm somewhat stitious, so I wouldn't end the book on 13. So it's not the last one, but 13 isn't the last one. But they're nearly all set in Norfolk, and a place that I know quite well and have come to know better during the books. And they feature sort of Norfolk archaeology, Norfolk landscape, and Norfolk legends, particularly the new one, the Nighthawks, which is about the Black Shark.
And that's really familiar to an awful lot of people here. And I've started reading the Nighthawks, and I'm just struck, especially with lockdown, at how familiar all the places are. From the first line, you refer to Hunstanton, and I can't remember, but 3 of the North Norfolk places in one sentence, and I immediately wanted to be back there. And just on every page, the birds and the legends, and so. But I feel like that is one of the appeals locally for all of our readers, but that doesn't explain that you are actually, the books are very popular nationally, aren't they? It's not just a Norfolk
Well,
thing.
I think I've been really pleased to find that out. And of course, it's especially gratifying for me to find they are popular in Norfolk, because, you know, you're the people who know that place, the places in the books really well. And I think this most recent book is probably because of lockdown. It was written in lockdown. I couldn't actually get to Norfolk. Normally I'd go to those places. So I think there's almost more Norfolk because of that, sort of throwing in all that I love about it. Adrian Mole, I don't know if you're Adrian Mole fans, he wrote a book called, well, he never finished it, but he was always starting a book called Longing for Wolverhampton. And maybe this is my book subtitled Longing for Norfolk. But I am really amazed that they're popular, and they are published all over the world in over 20 countries. America, they're very popular. I've been very lucky, and I did go to Norwich in Connecticut, which is not very, it's a lovely place, like Norwich in Norfolk. And they were popular there. They were very excited about them. I mean, I don't think they quite know what Norfolk is, but I think most places have those places that are land and sea and marshland, and the books are very, very popular in Denmark. And I've done lots of events there, and a place called Horsens, which is where those first bog bodies were actually found, and it's exactly like that. And of course, only 9,000 years ago, you can tell I'm married to an archaeologist, Norfolk was attached to Scandinavia, you know, so I don't think it's any surprise that they're popular in Scandinavia, because they're very similar myths and legends and very similar landscapes. So yes, it's been wonderful. Gosh, it's been wonderful that so many people around the world have taken to this forensic archaeologist who's not terribly glamorous and stomps around Norfolk digging up bodies.
I think we've talked to your friend William Shaw about the importance of setting, and how his Alexander Cupid book started with the setting and then gave rise to the characters and who would want to live there and what they might have been up to. But the setting isn't the only appeal with your books, is it? Because in lots of big series like this, customers might say, do we need to start at the beginning? And I would say you're going to get most out of it, actually, if you do, because I think that's part of the ongoing appeal of the characters. They do change and grow, relationships form and end, and consequences are come along, and you don't want to miss out. You don't want just a reference to it. So it's nice to see them get old.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. Oh yes, and William's Alexander Cupid book set in that Dungeness, another sort of bleak but beautiful coastline, are absolutely brilliant. And I definitely recommend, particularly the latest one, Gravesend, which maybe we'll talk about more about.
We'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, but yes, I think it is one of the privileges for a writer, really, to be able to write a series. And I teach creative writing, and quite often my students say, you know, oh well, you know, this will be in book 2, and I always say to them, there probably won't be a book 2 unless you're writing genre fiction, because I think only in crime fiction or romantic fiction maybe, or science fiction, do you get the chance to write a series about one character. And I first started writing a kind of literary fiction under my own name, and you know, you don't get the chance to write a sequel, you don't get a chance to write more, so it feels a great privilege. And I'm really pleased that you say to people to start at the beginning, because I think particularly the relationships, you know, there have been 12 years since I've started writing about Ruth. She's 12 years older. I hope it's not giving too much away to say she now has a child, and all the other officers on Nelson's team now have sort of very complicated love lives and relationships. So it has been it's one of the things that keeps it really exciting and interesting for me, I think. And characters like Cathbad, who's the druid who appears in the Crossing Places, I think at first I just thought he was going to be another suspect, and he's really almost taken over the book. So that's really fun too.
Yeah, I do have a soft spot for Cathbad, actually. I want to also throw out a word, and then I'd like to talk about the current books. As a writer and as a businesswoman, you are very generous, and that's right in line with our ethic and ethos here at the Social Enterprise, not for profit bookshop. You always strike me as giving so much of yourself in your books, and so much of the characters, really developing each of them. Each one is very believable, but also that almost like clockwork now, I can see that there's going to be a hardback in the spring and a paperback in the autumn, and you keep it going. And you always have time for your readers whenever you come to visit, and you've always had time for us. So I think that generosity people really respond to.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely thing to say. To be honest, it's my favourite part of the job, meeting readers and travelling to bookshops like yours. It is my absolute favourite part of the job. And it's been sad not to be able to do it this year. I did do a tour in February, which was really hard going. I did sort of like 3 events a day, and I'm really glad I did it because, of course, all that then stopped. And it's just so lovely to meet people who like books, because I think we're all booky people, we're all the same, aren't we? We all love books, we all love talking about books. So that's what I really love. And especially to support an enterprise like yours, it's a community bookshop, it's just a pleasure for me. And it's wonderful to see how the shop has grown since I was your second ever author visitor. So it's really has been absolutely wonderful. So yeah, that's the bit of the job I absolutely love. I love going to libraries and independent bookshops particularly, because I do think that this lockdown period has taught us how much we value those spaces, and spaces where we can meet and love books and talk about them. Absolutely.
Well, you have the door is always open to you when you're on your way up the A11 to the North Norfolk coast. Always stop by. I want to hear you talk about this, please, but I also have this in my hand.
Great, thank you. Well, Postscript Murders, yes, I have one too. Postscript Murders was out in February, and as you were saying, no, it wasn't. It was out in October, 1st of October. Because as you're saying, at the moment I'm publishing 2 books a year, one in February, one in October. This is a standalone, but it does feature, oh, look at that, that's lovely.
Sorry, I was going to do that subtly, but yes, we are, there I can't really see
this
that.
This is our Christmas catalogue.
This is our Christmas catalogue. So you're a pick in our Christmas catalogue this year, so people might be familiar with it from there. Sorry.
That's very Christmassy, I have to say. So this is a standalone, but it features a character that people might remember from the Stranger Diaries, D.S. Harbinder Kaur. And it starts when an elderly lady living in a retirement block of flats, sheltered housing on the south coast, is found dead. And at first people think it's natural causes. She was 90, not in the best of health. But then her carer starts to clear away her belongings, and she finds that Peggy had lots of crime novels, which is suspicious in itself, you will agree, and lots of crime novels. But more than that, a lot of them are dedicated to her, and some of them say, thank you for the murders. And Harbinder investigates a bit more. She takes her suspicions to D.S. Harbinder Kaur, and it turns out that Peggy was a murder consultant, someone who helped crime writers come up with murders. And at first, Harbinder's, inclined to dismiss this, but then a well-known writer is found dead, and she realizes that she does have a murder case on her hands. And the resulting investigation takes not only Harbinder, but Natalka, the carer, teams up with her friend Benedict, who runs the Seafront Cafe, and Edwin, Peggy's 80-year-old neighbour. And they go on a road trip that takes them to Aberdeen and involves them with literary festivals and all sorts of excitement. So I hope it's both a fun murder mystery, a road trip, and also, a love letter. Some people have said it's a book about writing, but it's a book about writers. But it's not really. It's a book about readers. and it's about reading. And the only qualification that any of the people have in the books to investigate anything is that they're readers. But somehow that's all. Sometimes that's all the qualification you need.
Wow.
I absolutely loved it, and I miss and I regret that Natalka and Benedict and Edwin are unlikely to come back. So if you could do another spin-off just for us.
I did find I missed them, and that hasn't happened to me particularly as much before. I did really miss spending time with them, I have to say.
Benedict. Yeah, I love Benedict, and I want to go to his cafe, but oh well. So this was terrific, and I will say that two of the other authors we've talked to have actually mentioned this as books that they are reading. So it's, you know, it's perfect for this time of year because it's a little bit spooky, but it's not going to keep you awake at night. It's a part of the population that's not always written about. It's very intelligent, very witty, and yes, it is about writers and writing and readers and crime, and a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a spoof, but it takes a gentle nudge at crime writers, I would say.
Well, yes, I think in the whole, because I was a publisher before I was a writer, and the whole publishing world, I think, comes in for a slight little gentle satire, but it's also about how much fun it is to be at a writing festival, even with a few murders thrown in. So yes, thank you so much. What lovely things to say about it. I just do hope it's a sort of fun read. I threw in all the things. I threw in all the Shakespeare titles that my publishers will never let me use for my books, and created all these golden age books. So that was great lot of fun.
It must have been. I think the fun comes through. Now, this is a gifty book in hardback. It will be out in paperback probably in the spring. I haven't looked it up. It's £18.99. Sorry?
July, maybe. I can't.
July? Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it's not been in hardback for long, has it? So if anyone doesn't want to buy this time of year because the budget doesn't stretch to it, but they haven't read this is the natural place to start, isn't it?
I hope so. Yes, you're so good at this, Tracy. Yes, it's a natural place to start. Yes, so The Stranger Diaries is my first standalone, and it starts off with a made-up sort of Victorian Gothic ghost story, really, and it's set in the modern day in a school that was once the home of a Victorian ghost story writer called R.M. Holland, and then a teacher at the school tragically is murdered, but her murder seems to reflect some of the deaths in the short story. And so it's a kind of literary, ghosty, Gothic short story. Another teacher, Claire, writes about it in her diary. And then she realizes that someone else is writing in her diary. And what's more, that person is the murderer. So it's a tricksy, I hope exciting, quite ghosty book, written in 3 parts in Claire's voice, in the voice of Harbinder, the detective who investigates the case, and in the voice of Claire's daughter Georgia, who is busy conjuring spirits when nobody's noticing her. So yes, I really hope that people could start with that one, and also could start there if they've never read any of my books, because it is a standalone, genuinely is a standalone. Except that then I wrote another book about Harbinder.
Yes, so Harbinder is the connection, but it is genuinely a standalone. And I thought this was going to be really spooky, and I don't like to be frightened, but it wasn't frightening. So it was just atmospheric.
It's amount of frightening. Yes, I know what you mean. I hope it's sitting by the fire telling ghost stories, but not too scary.
Yeah. I think that it hit the mark like that. I'd really be interested to know, though, because so many of our customers read what you write the minute it's published. What would you recommend they read next?
Oh, well, I've got lots of recommendations. One of the first ones is this, Death of a Mermaid by Lesley Thomson.
Yeah. Dropped it.
So Lesley is a really good friend of mine and a really good crime writer. In fact, Lesley, William Shaw and I often do events together as a crime trio. And even during lockdown, we've been doing Zoom events together, which sometimes are quite chaotic, but we've enjoyed ourselves. But this is Lesley's standalone. So Lesley writes a really good crime series, which are called the Detective's Daughter series, about a cleaner called Stella Darnell. So absolutely do read those. The first one is The Detective's Daughter. But this is a standalone. So a bit like with The Stranger Diaries, it's a book, if you haven't read any of Lesley's, you can start with this one. It's about a group of girls who were very, very close at school. They called themselves the Mermaids. And time has gone on, and one of them has become a detective, but the girls have become estranged. But then a murder brings them all together. It's set in New Haven, which is down the coast from me in Brighton. And a sort of typical, there's a history to it. It's a port. There's a lot about fishermen and fishing. And I think it's... marine noir, I think it could almost be the term coined for this book, but it's got some terrific characters in a wonderful sense of place and the most frightening denouement set on a trawler ship. So I absolutely recommend Death of a Mermaid.
Death of a Mermaid. Okay, we do have a copy in stock. It's just slightly out of reach at the moment.
It's got a very scary looking cover.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, so one to finish with the lights on.
Yes, but I hope a bit like mine, Lesley's books are always warm as well, so you won't be too scared, I hope.
Okay, I'm a bit of a wimp, I'm afraid.
There's a lovely pet hotel in it and lots of light moments, so yeah.
Excellent.
So I recommend that. I'd also recommend Gravesend by William Shaw. You've got a copy. I don't have a copy. I have a copy, but it's not here in the little study, which is so William is a really, really good writer. I know he's a huge friend of your stock and of your shop, and I think your in-house author. So he wrote a wonderful, he wrote a crime trilogy set in the 60s, which has 4 books in it. So Lesley and I are always teasing William about writing a trilogy of 4 books, which is quite like him really, because he makes the rules and then he breaks them. But then he wrote a wonderful standalone called The Birdwatcher, which was set on Dungeness. And introduced a character called Alexandra Cupidi, a woman police officer. And now there's a series about her. And she's just an amazing character. William is one of those crime writers. I think crime writers often don't get the credit for this because he's a man writing about women so well. And it's an amazing series. Deadlands, Salt Lane is another one, but the most recent one is Gravesend. And it's a fantastic crime novel. And it's the only crime novel you will read. I'm going to put my neck on the line now and say it's the only crime novel you will read that's partly narrated by a badger. So, has really gone out on a limb here. And when he told, because quite often, oh look, there you are, there they are, that's the Cupidi series. You're so good, Tracy. So when he told Lesley and I, we often talk about what we're going to write. He's like, well, yeah, I'm going to write this book. It's going to be written by a badger. Oh, well, okay, William, that's great. Maybe not so much badger, maybe more, but actually it is brilliant. And as with all good devices, it's not just a device, it's really important for the plot, which is partly about unscrupulous housing developers. And badgers live on a spot for hundreds of years. They have their sets there for hundreds of years. And in fact, archaeologists use badger sets because there's often stuff in them, that they've done quite a good job of digging up themselves. So absolutely recommend Gravesend by William Shaw. Wow. Now, another book I'd like to recommend, I don't have a copy of it here, is called Murder at Malabar House, and it's by Vaseem Khan. And have you got it there? And then it's by Vaseem Khan. Now, Vaseem Khan writes a series about a baby elephant called the Baby Ganesh series, and they're set in India. But this, again, is Vaseem's standalone. And I just found it an amazing book. It's set during partition, which is a time that I didn't, to my shame, know very much about. Although it's only some 1947. I might have got that date wrong, but it's late 1940, so not that long ago. And it just introduces another amazing woman heroine called Persis Wadia. I hope I'm saying that right. And she's just a great character. And the thing that's lovely about Vaseem's books, if you haven't read them, is he has this lovely lightness of touch. So he deals with quite dark subjects, but in such a light way. There's always so much humour. You will laugh aloud, and there's always so much humanity. He's a very humane writer, so I absolutely recommend Vaseem's work generally, but particularly this one. What was the other book I said I was going to talk about?
I have One by One, and the shop is open for click and collect, so there's quite a lot of noise in the background, so occasionally I might not hear everything.
So I've just read this, One by One by Ruth Ware. Just finished it. It is brilliant. Ruth is a really good writer. She wrote The Turn of the Key and Death of Mrs. Westaway and lots of other books, but this One by One is set in a ski resort. And I've never been skiing. It's one of those things that I've just never done, and don't let that put you off, because I still absolutely love the book. But it's sort of isn't that a perfect setting for what is kind of a closed room, locked room, closed circle murder mystery? Because in this lovely ski chalet, which is looked after by Erin, the chalet girl, I guess you'd call her, and Danny, the cook, come this group of .com entrepreneurs, I guess you might call them. Fairly ghastly, some of them, and very rich and very entitled. And they turn up for this skiing holiday that's also a sort of company bonding experience. And then they start to die one by one. And it is excellent. And it really, she's marvelous at cranking up the tension till you get to the end, which has a terrifying denouement in the ice and snow. So absolutely recommend that, One by One by Ruth Ware.
What a selection, Elly. So, I have a question, if I may. As you're talking about these and the crime novels that I've been reading and have read, there seem to be an awful lot of female protagonists. So female people who are leading these investigations. Why is that?
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because in fact, all the books I've said, even though 2 are by men and 2 by women, they've all got female protagonists. And yes, it is interesting, isn't it? And I think it is something that's happening particularly at the moment. And I know I wouldn't like to comment, but some people say we are in a second golden age of crime fiction. And I think a lot of this is driven by women writers and women characters. But I'm really interested in Gothic fiction. And I did a really nice event recently with Sarah Ward, who writes as Rhiannon Ward. And I don't know if you've heard of this one, The Quickening by Rhiannon Ward. It's really good. I'm always holding it the right area. I've got it the right way. And we were talking about this, about Gothic fiction, and how women are often the drivers of it. They have all the volition as the characters and that was really something quite unusual when Gothic fiction came around. So I wonder if it's something like that. You know, it is a I think hopefully now in crime fiction, women aren't just the victims. Of course, they will sometimes be the victims, but they're also the movers of the plot. And, you know, I think it's something that's really quite exciting about crime fiction.
Yeah, you're right. It hadn't occurred to me until you were speaking there. And I was just thinking about, you know, a lot of these, especially when you were mentioning earlier about Denmark and how your books do so well there, that kind of Scandi noir stuff also has quite a lot of female protagonists. I do wonder if it's something to do with kind of the liminality of women in those detective positions, that they are kind of outsiders, they get a slightly different perspective. I don't know. It's something I'm going to reread your books with.
I think that's a really interesting point, Em. You know, and something I'd like to think more about. Yes, maybe that's maybe having certainly Harbin Kaur, who is the detective in Stranger Diaries and in Postscript Murders. She is a gay Sikh, a British Indian woman, and I think she does feel a bit in a liminal zone of her own, really. So those characters are very, very interesting to explore. And it's certainly the same with some of the other female characters that we've talked about today. So very interesting. We'll have to talk more about that.
Yes, let's.
This has been absolutely fascinating, and we could talk to you all day, but fortunately we know that you will be bringing out a new book every year, and so
I'm going to do some writing now.
Lunch break's over.
Yeah, no, but it'd be lovely to have a lunch break, even distanced, with you two.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, well, anytime you ever are in this area or want to whatever, we are always up for the conversation, so do keep in touch, and thank you again for all your writing and your characters. They've made a lot of people very happy.
Thank you for all your support. I really appreciate it, and as soon as visits are allowed again, I'll be over.
We can't wait. Thank you again. Bye.